Activate Your Introvert, the weekly show to help leaders build performance by understanding introversion. In this week's show, managing working from home. Yes, I know you might have it sussed by now, and things might be more hybrid than before, but then again, that might make it the right time to check you're doing all you should. A discussion with Sarah McVannell. Sarah helps leaders leverage the exponential power of recognition to retain top talent and sustain healthy bottom lines. She's Canada's leading recognition expert. Question of the week: how to get your introverts talking. This week it looks like Peppa Pig doesn't like working from home, or at least in Peppa's idyllic world such things just don't happen. But what about you? Are you managing home, work, hybrid in such a way that makes sense for you and your team, including your introverts? One thing that might be important when considering the working pattern is to think how recognizing your team's contribution should change if or as working patterns change. In this week's discussion, Sarah and I talk about recognition. So I'm just flagging a thought up for you, not only to consider recognition, but also for introverts and extroverts, how it might be different, and working from home or in the office. How does that change it? But on the subject of working from home, I saw in the news this week, Portugal has introduced new laws that ban employers from contacting their staff outside working hours, and that oblige them to reimburse some of the costs involved in working from home, such as higher energy bills. Especially now it's getting cold, the laws are partly designed to make Portugal a more attractive destination for foreign digital nomads. But also, they ban the use of technology to monitor staff who are working at home, and make it illegal to discriminate between office-based and remote workers when it comes to career progression, holiday entitlements and other benefits. I don't know that's coming to the UK, of course. Might never do, but it's just a thought, isn't it? On the subject of working from home, what do you do with your team? 3 quick tips to help manage working from home, and then a thought about introverts, extroverts as well. Number 1. Agreed deadlines and priorities are now even more important than before. Discussing, setting, and more importantly, agreeing how you'll both check in and then stick to the plan. Number 2. Agree how and when you'll discuss progress. Calling at agreed times means you're not interrupting. Don't just ask, is it going okay? Dig deeper. Perhaps ask to see some of the work in progress. Now, introverts don't like to share incomplete work quite often, so agree these progress checks up front. Extroverts, of course, may relish collaboratively working on half-completed thoughts. Combine these progress checks with a shared job management system so you can see what they've completed as they go without interrupting them. And number 3, arrange more regular one-to-one and team meetings via Zoom, Teams or whatever you use. Now for introverts and extroverts. My research shows introverts prefer a clear, structured set of tasks to something less defined, so help them create that structure. Introverts can easily be more productive when working alone if they have the freedom and the structure they enjoy. Extroverts tend to prefer something less structured, but you may need to jointly impose some structure or risk them wandering off. And of course they tend to be energized by those coffee machine chats and interruptions. Can you get them to consider the way they work and how they might join in with other colleagues at different times for different types of projects? I even know some people who just leave Skype running on their tablets beside them whilst they're working, and that way their colleagues, it feels like they're almost next door to them or in the same room, and a lot of the time they ignore them and some of the time they just chat. I wonder if Peppa Pig has all those elements covered. Peppa, in case you didn't see it, has been in the news this week. I won't say more about that, but I haven't just randomly started talking about the children's cartoon character. But let's move from the cartoon world and recognise the real world. It's time to speak to Canada's leading recognition expert, Sarah McVannell.
Welcome, Sarah.
Thanks for having me on the show, John.
In a few minutes, we're no doubt going to talk about recognition in companies, different preferences for different types of people. Before we dive into that, are you an introvert, an extrovert, and probably more importantly, what does that mean to you?
I have an extroverted preference. However, I think in COVID, I have become one with my introversion. I love being home. I love spending time with my family and a few close friends. It's been a wonderful way to really embrace the value on the other side of the preference.
The whole 18 months or however long it's been now of COVID, lockdown, not lockdown, has made people reassess a lot of things. One other question, what's the frog lady all about?
Well, frog stands for forever recognize others' greatness. And I actually do frog people in public, which probably people with an introverted preference just want to run and hide. All of the extroverts laugh and, oh, what's that? When I frog people, I really want them to be able to just stop and take a moment and listen as a often perfect stranger reflects on their greatness. So I want to frog you, and this is legit. I want to frog you, John. You have a beautiful, kind way of inviting people into this conversation. It truly feels like a partnership, and as opposed to your podcast.
Thank you. I've never been frogged before, so that's brilliant.
Off the bucket list, check.
So what did it stand for again?
Forever recognize others' greatness.
I love it. That's one thing to take from our discussion already. Recognition at work. Don't people just want more money?
Oh, that's actually rewards, my friend. And there are some industries that have a very compensation-based motivation. They're extrinsically motivated. So somebody where there's sales targets, so you're 100% commission based. If you're a lawyer and it's about billable hours, then certainly. The other part of the research on money is that when people make under a certain amount, it has a very significant impact on their life. So in Canada, the research is that that's about $50,000 a year. So you can probably imagine that if somebody is recognized through a perk, an incentive, then that would have a very significant impact on their family and their lifestyle, their well-being. The majority of us, however, when we are making a decent income, when work is meaningful in other ways, such as connection and being able to feel like we have a definable output, the recognition is so important because that is what affirms that you belong here. That is what affirms that you matter. So, John, you matter as the podcast host, as opposed to just be able to replace it with somebody else that, oh, tomorrow I could do it and the next day, my kid can do it. It's truly your indisputable stamp on your role, on your clients, on your colleagues. So recognition really is valuing the person and their unique value. And when we recognize people and it's not transactional the way money is, the way it's relational, the way appreciating somebody for who they are, the strengths, the values, their skill sets they bring, then that motivates people to do their best work and frankly, to come back tomorrow in the age of the great resignation that we're in right now.
Very much of the time, isn't it, where lots of people are looking around and going, you know what, I'd rather go elsewhere. So recognition will help with that.
Yes.
I love the way that you separated recognition and reward as well, though.
Absolutely. Now, this is not to negate the fact that for some people that no matter what their income or their profession, that may be their number one driver. It's, I'm not discrediting that. It's just the research shows that on average, 95% of people say, tell me thank you. 92% of people say, I need personal specific words of acknowledgement for that to truly land and to feel like it's meaningful recognition. And 88% of people say, write me a thank you note. I think what's really valuable in our conversation about introverted, extroverted preferences is the way in which we deliver those may be quite different for it to feel sincere and for it to land. If you have an introverted preference and I decide at a stand-up meeting out of the blue and to surprise you and say, hey, everybody, let's just give some round of claps to John. John, you have, and they're like, oh, it may be complete. You're shaking your head. Would that be the definition
Absolutely.
of a pain?
Yep. So it's about understanding individuals, yes, when it really comes down to it, but splitting between introvert and extrovert preferences help a leader to recognize employees in the right way.
Yes, and peer-to-peer as well. That's our greatest opportunity to spread recognition.
That's really good, because I was going to ask about that, which was, where should this recognition be? Should it be among peers? Should it be between directors recognize staff, or is it managers? Where should it be?
The answer is yes.
Good. I like that answer.
Yeah. Full stop. Yes. I mean, imagine how much more energy you have in acknowledgement and appreciation and connection. I love Brene Brown's definition of connection. It's the energy that exists when people feel seen, heard, and valued. One of the key drivers of what makes working more valuable than, let's say, running your own business or having a side hustle even, is that you can have a sense of connection with so many people, your boss, your peers, your partners, suppliers, and maybe your patients or customers, depending on what type of business you're in. And you can't necessarily get that working for yourself or volunteering. And we really need people to consider how recognition can be part of the, quote, way we do things around here. It becomes a cultural anchor, a team value, an organizational norm. And then bringing it so that everyone feels comfortable, we may need to do some kind of recognition checklist. In fact, if people would like to get serious about finding ways to match what the preference of their colleagues and their staff are, on my website, greatnessmagnified.com, under cool stuff, there's an actual recognition checklist. And I think what you'll find is, if you use a tool like that, or you use it to create your own tool, when when John fills it out and John says, please do not give me public recognition, I'm a 1 out of 5 on that being my preference. And then you ask Sarah, Miss Extrovert herself, I'm a 4 out of 5. Imagine if you, as an introverted boss, you never recognize people publicly, but I feel like, well, you're not really acknowledging me because you've never said it publicly. And the reverse could be, whether I'm introverted or extroverted as a boss or as a peer, but I don't realize actually, John, that I'm embarrassing you. And again, this is not to polarize people. It's not that if you have an introverted preference, you only ever want it to be private.
But it's a quick way of starting to understand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Honoring people's preferences, both in their energy management on the introversion, extroversion style, but also that question you asked me earlier around, is it money? Is it team? Is it celebrations? Is it progress? What are some of the things that make somebody feel a true sense of accomplishment? And when we acknowledge and we recognize that, people want to do more of it, and they accomplish more.
The director can recognize, whether publicly or privately, depending on those preferences we just spoke of,
yes,
could recognize one of their employees, and that's great. And I guess that then helps if all of the rest of the directors understand that, because that now means the board recognizes that great employee. How do you get about getting other peers to recognize? If I'm running the company and I can do all the recognition I like, but I know that I want to get peer recognition going, what do I do?
Well, certainly role modeling is an important part of that. And that can be top down, bottom up, side to side. If you're a really flat organization, it could be part of how you have stand-up huddle meetings and in your team meetings, both virtual as well as in person. But that very question is sometimes why I end up doing team-based sessions. So as a great example of that, I worked in Canada, we call them municipalities. So it's kind of your local level of government. And they did it as a leadership session. And now individual divisions are reaching out and they're wanting to bring this to their team, because the leaders are finding they're having so much success of building a greater sense of connection and rebuilding a sense of community, even though they've moved to hybrid teams. And they want to encourage it to peer-to-peer. So that's now kind of the next level that we've been doing, is I've been speaking then at a team-based level. And that was never the plan originally. The other thing is you could just ask people at a team meeting, hey, if you were to be acknowledged one way consistently in 2022, we consistently use this strategy, what would it be? And just ask people. And maybe 80% of people say, you know what, I think we should be writing thank yous to each other more. Or why don't we build in kudos into the front end of our meetings?
Quickly summarizing then, it's very important that we start to recognize everybody in the business, but starting to change the way we recognize them based on, let's use introversion, extroversion, but ultimately down to their individual preferences. And The more we can build that in at the different levels of the business, the better as well. That's superb. Can I ask a tip for an introverted manager to recognize their employees? What might the introvert do?
Is to know that your preference is not necessarily other people's preference. I'll have introverted managers come up to me after a keynote and they'll say, I don't want to embarrass anybody and I want to make sure it's sincere. When I dig a little deeper, it's probably because they've experienced something that has been embarrassing to them. So I will say, treat others the way they want to be treated. So my tip would be, if you're holding back, reflect on how that's maybe indicative of a situation you've had. And that's not necessarily the way recognition feels for other people.
And I guess that's almost the same tip for extroverted managers, but the other way around.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. For extroverted leaders, because you very much are noticing the energy of outside, you're noticing how people are reacting, perhaps you're tuned into that in the moment, course correct. If part of your superpower, extroverts, are being able to think on your feet, talk out loud, this may be the